Well, welcome. We continue talking to people who want to make a difference. There's always opinions. There's always people that say we should do this or that somebody should do that. There's a very small number of people who get up and say, put me in, coach. I'm ready to make the investment to change things. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The school committee is is the most important set of people if you have children or you have homes, because they set the policies that are going to set our kids up for the future. They put the value in the school system that puts value in your homes. So tonight we're going to meet one of those special people who'd like to help make changes, who's been making changes. So why don't we start with an introduction?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Matthew Zacchilli. I'm a husband, a father of 3 daughters, and a lifelong Milfordian, 4th generation. Professionally, I am an IT consultant. I've been in the field for about 20 years now. And then because I have a lot of spare time with 3 young children, on top of that, I'm a current school committee member, as you mentioned. I am a town meeting member, and I also volunteer as a soccer coach for the Milford Hopedale Youth Association.
That was the best thing I ever did as a father, was volunteering to be a soccer coach.
Yeah. My wife hijacked the first year with our oldest, and when my second wanted to play in kindergarten, she was a little worried about kindergartners, as was I. But I had so much fun last year. It was really, really rewarding.
We played 40 weeks a year. Because
Wow.
we started in August, did the fall season, then went indoors, then came out in March and did the spring season. So we were 40 weeks, 4 nights a week. Because we had 2 practices and a game. And then we always went out to the movies or the dinner as a team, either Friday or Saturday night. But it gave me a chance to be with my daughters. Now, how old's your oldest?
My oldest is 9. She's a woodland.
Yeah, you're still babies. They still want to hang around Dad.
They do.
When they get to be teenagers, booking time was so much easier when you knew you had practice.
Yeah.
I was guaranteed 4 nights a week with my daughter all the way to high school.
I'm terrified. I'm terrified. It is not that far off.
It goes way too fast.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like daughters.
I would agree. Not that I have any other exposure, but I would agree.
I felt bad for my darling bride because things were great until they hit that period of second semester, junior year in high school. Now, my wife was very mean to my daughter. She would come home and say things like, "Hi, how are you doing?" Which caused an explosion. What do you mean by that? It was like,
Sure.
but I survived it because every time they would start picking on me, I'd say, "Keep it up, and you'll count on your mother for everything." That was it. That was it.
I'll put that one in my back pocket. I don't know if that'll fly, though. I might get in trouble.
Oh, you get in trouble.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the spousal support goes away right away, but girls never forsake their dads. Of course, they go in cycles with my wife because they couldn't be in the same zip code senior year in high school. But later on, when she went to college, she comes home for a weekend. And I remember walking in the door saying, "Who are you?" She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're playing boggle on a Saturday night with your mother. Some alien has definitely possessed you." And now they're best friends.
I was going to say, now they're best friends, I bet, right? I bet they are.
Yeah, that was her calling just before we came in the studio when the phone rang to find out about the Doobie Brothers concert. What seats do we want?
That's great.
The fact that she still and her husband still invite me to go with them. But we start off with the age-old question on this show. Matt, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Sure. So let me back up for anyone who doesn't know me. We'll go back 3 years to my first campaign. I was about the time when I got the bug to start giving back. 20-something years in corporate world. I love my job, I love my clients, I love my company, but there's something about working for a for-profit company that leaves you lacking in that give back to the community sense. So that hit me. It hit me hard, and I wanted to figure out what I could do. And honestly, the direction was very clear for me, pretty much from the beginning, because generations of my family have given back to this very community over and over and over again. So their experiences and their leadership in that sense has really paved the way and put me on the map to give back to this very town. I landed on school committee because so many of them have been educators or still are in the Milford Public Schools. So I've been around the ideas, the discussions, the banter, the spitballing of how Milford Public Schools can help kids, how education works, how it can become better. That was at family dinners. It was and still is part of holidays with our family. So for me, something towards education felt right, but I know I am not a teacher. I don't have whatever gene that those wonderful humans have to do what they do. So this was my way of being able to take my expertise and my personality and my values and help and give back to those in our community. So I followed their footsteps in a sense towards education, and I made a push for school committee, and I was lucky enough to get supported by our community, and they put me here. So here we are. I'm looking for a second term, and I'm very proud to say that my dedication and commitment and energy is the same now, going into the last month or so of my first term as it was when I got back on. I think that dedication has been shown by my high attendance. I've been to nearly every meeting. I served on 5 subcommittees in the last 3 years, countless interview committees. The work really is something that I enjoy doing, and I know when a lot of people talk about the school committee, those who really understand what the role is like understand how much work can come with it. It doesn't feel like work to me. It really is an enjoyable experience to be a voice and be a part of the discussion. And the other reason I'm running is that this committee right now is in the middle of a lot of critical decisions, and we're really coming up on some pretty big, potentially, directional, changing decision-making items that are really, I think, important for Milford Public Schools. And I think that it's critical to have an experienced voice, someone who's been involved in all of the decisions leading up to this point, and involved in those ongoing discussions right now, to continue carrying on. And I want to be that voice, and I want to continue to contribute as we see these things through and see where we can take Milford Public Schools, and that's why I'm asking for another term.
What do you see as pick 3 of the biggest challenges the school committee faces?
Sure. So budget is always one. If you're doing your job right as a school committee member, right? Budget. That's your primary driving document. That's one of the biggest responsibilities of the committee. If you're doing that right, it's always a challenge because dollars are a finite number. It doesn't matter how much you have. There is an end for everybody. But I'm going to set that aside because I think we're going to get to that in a little bit. So for me, I have facilities, which is always a hot topic. I have attendance, and I have literacy. And we can elaborate on a little of those. We'll start with attendance. The pandemic exposed a problem and maybe even accelerated it. And this is a national thing. This is not just Milford, but just because it's not unique to us doesn't mean that we don't try to adjust it, right, and try to put some attention to it. So attendance is way down. Chronic absenteeism, which is missing, I believe it's 18 days over the course of the school year, is incredibly high. Obviously, there's a lot of factors into not being in school, and we all can't be in every place at the same time. There are reasons why you miss school, just like there's reasons why you miss work. But the bottom line is the less you're in school, the less exposure you have, the less opportunity you have to learn. And we're seeing data. We just had a presentation, I believe it was our last meeting or the meeting before, that has a clear line between attendance and MCAS scores, for example. Principal Otland at the high school has a presentation he gives to all incoming classes about the importance of attendance and what it does to their educational career 9 through 12. So attendance is a critical piece, and I'm pretty proud to be part of the group who supported the hiring of 2 attendance officers at the high school. And their job specifically is to track down those kids that are at risk of being chronically absent. Their job is to kind of meet them where they are and to try to figure out how they can help. If it's an understanding issue in the culture of their home, if it's a transportation issue, if there's other things that they need assistance with, their job is to get in there and have those discussions and help these kids figure out what's keeping them from being at school and try to steer them back, because that's the only way we're going to go ahead and start helping everybody learn and grow faster.
Now, how do they do that? I mean, I'm not proud of the fact that I was one of those kids that missed a lot of school in the first year. I'd show up once in the week to take my test, get my B, be happy, move on. Uncle Paul Raftery, the principal back then, who was an amazing man, decided that he was going to make it so I couldn't miss school. And he would get in his car on North Bow Street, drive over to Water Street, pick me up every morning, and bring me to school. I'm still amazed that he went that far to make sure that I made it to school every day. How do you do that when you now have 1,200 kids?
Yeah, I mean, pardon me. It's a number one. It's excuse me. It's a bigger than school issue, right? We have attendance officers. We could have 50 of them. They can't do everything, right? They can help address things. They can help draw the lines to the different support pieces that the schools and the town offer. They can help paint the picture of the importance of attendance, right? But it's more than that. As a parent, it's on the parents. But at times, there's scenarios outside of our control, right? I had perfect attendance through high school. That was driven into us, me and my brothers, by my parents. You go, you go, you go. School is important.
Well, Zacchilli family was kind of associated with school.
They were, and look, my mother still jokes about it to this day with my kids. If you're not throwing up or bleeding, you're in school, right? It doesn't have to be that far, and I'm not saying that that's how people have to go. Mental health is incredibly important. If you're not there mentally, your learning is suffering. So people don't need perfect attendance, but that drive that you expressed in your experience and from my parents of making sure that that is the priority, that is the goal, that's where you need to be. That comes from outside of school, but it comes from inside of school too, and that's why we have the officers, and that's why we have a really great staff that push the importance of education. It's a holistic approach. They can only do so much, but they are there. They're making visits, they're making phone calls, they're talking to students, they're getting them the help they need to get them there and get them to be present in class. And it's something that we are seeing. Our last data, I think it was probably late summer that we received, our absenteeism stopped getting worse. It started to get better. So they are making an impact.
Now, this may sound totally inappropriate, but the absenteeism, is it very different in established families versus new families to Milford? I say that because, you think about the Zacchilli family, generation after generation of being involved in the schools,
Right.
being involved with the kids. You take a family who's immigrated to Milford. My father had 4 years of school in Portugal. And after 4 years, he got told, time to get a job.
Yeah.
You're 13 or whatever you are, it's time to get a job. Luckily, he dedicated himself to driving home the fact that my job was to get grades in school.
Sure.
But is it different for people who never had kids in school now coming to Milford and trying to deal with the fact that they have to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any stats behind that, right? Now, obviously, for me in my situation, we had the means, we had our health. We didn't have any critical roadblocks that were preventing getting to school, being present, having what we needed. So we were very, very lucky in that situation. But yeah, we have a large population of students who, even just from the pandemic, had large gaps in their learning. Some of these students and some of these families are just trying to settle in to a place where they can build a life. And for some of them, education is as important as we have it here, and as much as we put an emphasis on education, not just in Milford, but in the United States. Other countries, it's not as important. It's not as driven. It's not as established. So I'm sure there are some scenarios where that comes into play, but it's such a complicated picture of why somebody would be at school and why somebody wouldn't. It's all of these factors, and that's why it's important to have people like attendance officers that can help sort through what our students need in order to get them there. What's blocking them, and how do we get them help? And that's the purpose of these individuals that we have at the high school. And we'll get to the budget, but it would be nice if we could to start expanding that to address the wider population. But right now we have them focused on high school because obviously, the entire journey of education is important. But you really start getting down to an 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade because that phase of your life is about to end and you're moving on. And you really gotta nail down that last piece. And obviously that's our largest group of students as well. So it's an easy aspect, right? And also when you get to the high school level, they're a lot more independent. So there are obviously some situations where they're supposed to be going to school. Where are they? Do they get there on time, right? So it's a lot of work, and it's something that's happening all over the place, and hopefully we can address it. And if more good ideas come up from other places, we're obviously open to try to get them.
Well, one thing I saw changing when I was a kid, my parents paid the teachers to educate me, not raise me. The biggest worry I had, not that I wasn't perfect in school, but if I screwed up, beat me, tie me up, do whatever you want, put me in detention for life, but don't call my parents.
Yeah.
It was the idea that I don't want them thinking I embarrassed my family. But when I served on the school boards, I started to see things like the teachers were expected to almost raise the kids, not just educate them.
Right.
Is that getting better?
I mean, without being in a classroom and having those interactions with parents as a teacher, I don't know. But I do think that education has changed. The way teachers teach and the expectations of teachers has shifted, and I think in a lot of ways it's shifted because society shifted, right? We have different views of what's important. There's different views in general about who's supposed to do what. We pay our teachers to educate. That's what they want to do. That's what they committed their lives to do. That's what they enjoy. But also in Milford, we have an incredible group of those folks because they do it while also helping guide our students and our kids in growth, right? Everybody's heard the saying that it takes a village to raise a kid, right? That is not just if you're a single parent. That is not just if you have 5 or 6. You send your kids off to be with these people for hours a day. They're around them. Children grow and learn and are molded by their environment. So yeah, they leave your house and they leave my house, and we're trying to teach them and raise them as people with the values that we love. But they're going to pick up their own pieces. That's what makes them unique. And we have a staff that embraces that and does a really good job of taking that on as well. Now, obviously, again, this is just like the attendance. This is a two-way street. It is not go to school and raise my kid and teach them. But that also applies to things like math and reading. It's not I'm teaching you to read as a teacher, and when you go home, the books are down. As parents, we have to help with that stuff just as much, if not way more, than our teachers are helping guide things like social emotional learning.
Well, you bring up something that you'll experience in a few years. Kids getting into high school. And then you're lucky if you get an hour or 2 a day with them as a parent.
Yeah.
They're always involved in good stuff, but they're involved. You as a school committee member dictate the policies that shape 6 to 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's incredible responsibility.
It's wild to think about. 5 days a week, 180 days a year. They're following a path that's laid out by the leadership of Milford Public Schools, and it includes the school committee, yeah.
I wouldn't say includes, it's driven by.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you're being humble, but
I am.
realistically, what you all decide has an incredible impact.
It does.
And my hat's always tipped to our teachers because what they do is amazing. And my daughter put it in perspective once when I was talking about teachers on the show and everything they do, and she said, "Dad, you don't get it. If I bring a child to their potential, maybe a little bit more, I'm just doing my job. That's what I'm there for. You don't have to say anything. That's what teachers love to do, is to see the kids
Right.
grow to their potential.
And they love it. And I think that's also shown by the commitment we have in our staff. We have an incredibly high retention rate of staff. We don't have a lot of turnover. We have people here for a very, very long time. It's because they're committed to this community and they're committed to our kids. And they love their jobs. And that's something that's starting to get more scarce nationally in terms of education. And there's any
Well,
number of pieces on that one that
The
are
passion
above
is
me.
shown when my daughter hit Stacy. Her French teacher came up to me and said, "Do you remember what your last words were to me?" Because she was my French teacher.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie Longo, an amazing woman. And I said, "I dare say I don't." She goes, "Don't you remember telling me, why are you learning French? You'll never, ever use it." And I said, "Yeah, I probably did say that." She goes, "Where did you just come back from?" I said, "Paris. I just spent 4 years living in Paris." But it was amazing to me that, one, she remembered who I am, and two, that she would remember that tidbit.
It's part of the personality of educators. I don't know how they do it. I could meet somebody 5 times, and there's a high probability I won't remember their name. I don't know how they do it, but they do. They don't just remember your name. They remember your name. They remember what you were like. They remember your favorite things. It's
She remembered what I
absolutely
said to her 30 years prior.
incredible. Yeah.
You know, it's just shocking. Now, we talk about budget. We just went through a meeting that was a shock to me, because too many people are still under the impression that Milford has endless money. In the last few years, the state's taken very good care of us,
They have.
with $6 and $7 million extra per year to help us. This year, 4%, you're on your own. I expected a very, very challenging meeting with the school committee. What was your perspective on that meeting?
My perspective on the meeting, and I don't know if I said this on or before we started. Again, I'll just reiterate that we have a very locked in, dialed in group right now. The 7 individuals on this committee are very focused on moving forward, on picking up our pace and growth. And I think that what you saw in that meeting was 7 individuals that see a challenge, see a hurdle in front of us, and fully take on that challenge to be fiscally responsible to the town and to get our kids what they need at the same time. And it was not a situation of, we're going to ask for everything we can and go battle FinCom to say, give us the money. You can't go asking for something until you put an effort on your own. This is a parenting discussion I'm in the middle of with some kids right now about putting in effort before you ask for assistance as you grow and become more independent. That lesson applies perfectly to the school committee. We have what's probably approaching a $70 or over $70 million budget. We were given 18% increases 2 years ago, 22% the year after that, which was just last year. Make no mistake, I'm not thrilled with the state dropping this on us now, especially after a massive amount of tax cuts that were not supposed to touch education, and then this happens. But it is what it is. We're still getting something, and this is part of the challenge of being on school committee. This is what you've been handed. Make it work. And I think everybody there has the focus, and I have the focus of, let's sit down, let's roll the sleeves up, and let's get this taken care of. And we do that, number one, just thinking about how our budget works, right? There's a term that gets thrown around a lot that I'm not even going to use because it can be very confusing to a lot of people. But essentially, your school is run on a zero-based budget, like any department in the town, realistically. So you have your budget, and at the end of the year, it's zero. And then you take your budget that you had, and you move it to the next year, and you adjust it to make sure that you're covering the increases that are coming up in transportation, utilities, salary increases, and that becomes the base for next year's budget, and then you work from there. The first step is to take that and have a good hard look at it. Now, 80-90% of it's spoken for. It's utilities, it's salaries, there's not much you can do with some of it, but there is some room in there. And Milford's done a good job of not wasting. And wasting, I mean, we're not just playing with pet projects and throwing money around. A lot of the money that we put into it has had a purpose and a beneficial purpose. But that's not to say that there isn't room for adjustment. Can things be cut? That could be determined. I don't know. Can things be realigned? It could be just a situation of, we had this long list of new initiatives that we wanted to take care of. We spent a couple of budget meetings. We're talking, we're at around 6 to 7% right now is where we're sitting at, trying to still make some adjustments. It was going to be at like 11 or 12. We were going very aggressively with the expectation we were getting more. Now, there's a lot of stuff in there that we need to do. We need a fourth grade teacher. The third grade is bigger than the fourth grade. I believe there's more teachers in third grade than fourth grade. What do we do? Well, you can make adjustments. You can change some expectations. We can shift some things around. We can get creative. And I think that that's what we're doing right now. We're sitting down. We're looking at all of the options. We're putting everything out there. And we have to have those discussions between the committee and the administration and between the principals and the committee and administration as well. It's important to figure out where our critical points are, what we absolutely need, and then find a way to get there, because it doesn't matter what the budget is, 4%, 15%, 30%, it doesn't matter. That doesn't change our needs, and it doesn't change our challenges, and we still have to address that. And I think that we're willing to go to bat for the schools and for the kids, and we will, to town meeting, and I think this town is very generous and very supportive of our kids. But before we do that, we need to make sure that our house is in order, so to speak.
But it was so refreshing watching the news of the other towns.
Yeah.
Teachers going on strike, the school committee going to war with the finance committee and the select board. To walk in and to have Chris and Kevin, the head of the school committee and the head of the schools, start off saying, we know that this year is tough. And we would love to be able to come in and ask you for the 12, 15% that we thought we had. But we know reality. The taxpayers of Milford can't take that whole burden on.
Yeah.
So we're slicing it down, and I think you started at 7 and change. The official word was 4%, and I was not scared to say, look, we know you can't cut to 4.
Right.
But can you get to 6.5? And the fact that we were debating 1%, now 1% for the school at $700,000, it's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
But we're debating 1%.
Right.
How are we going to squeeze a little bit more or cut a little bit more?
Right.
That was really impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was probably the weirdest motion I've ever made in 3 years. We put a lot of work and hours of work of getting that budget to a spot, and to sit down in that meeting and then make a motion to erase everything we just did. I've never sat there and said, I moved to pretend we did none of this and start over.
There's no initiatives.
There's no initiatives. You know what we did? Yeah, we did none of it. That was fun exercise. But it's necessary. It's where we are. And this is the other part that makes this challenging, is just the way the budgeting process works in Massachusetts is something that I still just can't understand how we don't have a better way. Between the governor's budget coming out in January, and then they give us some understanding of what we're getting in February, and then there's the House and the Senate budgets in April and June, and then there's a committee that they say is only necessary if those three don't align, which I'm guessing in the history of life, they've never aligned. So then it goes to this committee and they debate it, and then you're lucky if you get any of your money come July. We have to get ours done by the end of April because our town meeting is in May. Otherwise, we would have to have a special town meeting. So basically, you're trying to do it the best you can to predict and to line it up with everything else, and everything is just a bunch of moving parts. So, we're really committed, and I'm really committed to doing what we can to try to deliver on what our kids need, what our staff needs. But I'm a taxpayer as well. I have family of all ages in town that are taxpayers, and the thing about school committee that some people I think miss at times is it's not just about fighting for the kids, right? It's everybody votes for us, has the opportunity to vote for us. I wish everybody voted for us, but everybody has the opportunity to show up and vote for us, and we owe that type of focus and effort to the entire town, whether it's kid related or not, because we're handling 60, 65% of
So
the
the
town's
whole
money.
budget.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and it needs to be done appropriately. And if you do it the right way, I think in a town like Milford's, you get the support you need when it comes to town meeting, but you have to put the work in.
Well, I've never seen town meeting shortchange the kids.
Of course.
You know, somehow, some way. I mean, I always love budget season. We show up and bang our chests and say, we're broke, we have no money. Listen to the school committee saying, we only need $1 billion increase.
I would love that if you could.
And
do that
then
for us,
somewhere in the middle, we come out to, okay, what is it we can afford as a town? And it works.
if you don't ask the hard questions and you don't push, that's how I think towns get into bad spots financially. It feels like we have a lot of money because we're very good at managing it. We don't put ourselves in bad positions. We don't put ourselves in holes as a town or as a school committee to have to spend so much time digging out. And that's one thing that I think we have to our benefit this cycle. Even though our money from the state is lower, over the last 12 to 18 months, our enrollment has been flattened. So for the first time since I've been on the committee, we haven't been chasing compliance. So anyone who knows what that is, you start the school year, you're in compliant, you have the right amount of teachers to aides, you have the right amount of EL support, and then we get this influx of enrollment.
Brazilian summer.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of populations coming in, and it doesn't even really matter where they're coming from, international or national. They could be coming from Medway. It doesn't matter. When your increase in population goes up, your needs change, and by the time we get to budget season, we're out of compliance. And now suddenly we have to hire 4 teachers, but it's for compliance. We're not moving forward. We're just catching back up because we lost so much in the last 6 months. We haven't had to do that, which I think will help in this discussion, because when we talk about adding, we're not adding to get back to the ground level. We can add to
You're
move up.
not. You're
We're
not
not trying to keep our nose above water. We can go a little bit further ahead if we can afford to, obviously. But again, there's still a lot of discussions to be had, and I personally am feeling the pressure start to build. It's the end of February. We have a lot to discuss. We have a lot to do, and we have to get that ready because town meeting is going to be here fast.
Well, I felt comfortable being totally transparent with the school committee, saying, okay, we've got a plan, a forecast that we can level out at 161, reasonable increase. But now we have $10 million worth of asks.
Right.
5-pound bag, 10 pounds of sugar. Something for the first time in a long time in Milford, the bag is smaller than the sugar.
Well, I won't get too far off track, but I'm aware of other big decisions that are going to come to us at town meeting. And we may be in a situation to decide where our investments are more appropriate at this time.
And
there's a spot for that.
realistically, we went into the fire department. Chief Nelson said, I desperately need 4 people. And people will say, well, you don't have that many more fires than you did. But 70%, and I'm just making up a number, it could be 80, of their job, of their work, is medical.
Yeah.
So when the town increases by 2,000 or 3,000 people, whether they're registered or not, there's more medical calls.
Yes.
And the chief came to us and showed how he's rolling out ladder 1, that big ladder truck with 1 person.
Seems like an inefficient use of such a big piece of equipment, right?
Well, I mean, I watched
It's
TV
there,
and they
right?
got 4 people in Chicago fire, 3 in the middle, 1 in the end,
One guy.
and you got 1 Milford firefighter.
Yeah.
So he came and said, I need to add a +1. Problem is, again, I have issues with Robbie Tassino, our police chief, that he won't issue the memo that all crime and fires can only happen between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday.
Would be convenient, yeah. I'm sure he'd
If
like
they
that,
could,
honestly.
if they could enforce that memo,
Yeah.
we would be able to add 1 cop, 1 fireman, 1 firefighter, but we can't. You got to stock people for 24/7, so that's 4 people to get a net of 1.
Yeah.
And yet, they understood, well, at least, we haven't talked to the police chief yet, but fire chief understood that we may not be able to do it all this year. We may have to do it in steps. Because what we do this year we'll talk about the capital next, but in 3 years, we got a school coming.
That's a good segue.
Yeah.
It's a commitment, and we're not a small. It's not small town Milford, and that's, I think, something that has to be broken from the generational families here too. This is not small town Milford anymore. We are an urban community, and it's what makes us unique because of our positioning. Because we're in a spot that was never like this, but major cities are seeing those urban centers pushing out and out and out, and we're in a spot where we're right in the middle of Worcester, Providence, and Boston, and we're becoming that. We're growing. We're over 30,000 residents. The fire department feels it. The police department feels it. The school department feels it. And that's why it's important to have these hard discussions about how we continue to progress as a town and move forward as a district. But obviously, given our funding, it may have to be a very similar thing. It may be broken out and it may be a little slower, but we need to keep going forward.
Well, put it in perspective, we have 5 major schools in Milford. A school lasts 40 to 50 years before a major event has to happen, either a new school or renovation. So it's every 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So we're starting to think really hard about the high school that I want to go into. But we got to keep in mind that as soon as the high school's done, I got asked when we finished Woodland, why are you putting money in stabilization? I said, there's a school coming.
Yeah.
They said, we just built it. I said, yeah. And in 8 years, the high school will be here.
Right.
What do you think about the high school?
Well, I mean, I'll start with saying I'm a member of the facility subcommittee, and you're right. We owe it to our students to give them a warm, inviting, welcoming learning environment. And that's for all the schools. It doesn't matter how old they are. Woodland is 10 years old, by the way, or getting close to it. And the high school is the oldest. The high school is something that needs help. And it's great that I can say that I'm proud to be part of the group who got us into the MSBA. That's a program that I think Milford requires to move forward with a high school project because the numbers are very hard to swallow in surrounding communities for what they're looking at, and it is what it is in today's world. So we're on. This is one of the discussions that I want to stay a part of. I've been working with Mr. Agajanian actually for pretty much nonstop from the moment that we found out we were accepted into the eligibility period, which starts August 1st. It goes through March of 2025, and we owe them 8 deliverables during that period. There are time frames that you must hit, and if you don't hit them, you're not just out. You got to start over with reapplying, and I don't think we can afford to lose 2 to 3 years on progress of the high school. So we are incredibly focused on making sure that we're lined up with what we need. And honestly, our goal, and it's something that I'm working very hard towards, is that we can check off 3 of those 8 deliverables in the first week. And that's what we're aiming for. And it takes a lot of focus and attention to make sure that all of these pieces fall. But I think the most important piece is to show the MSBA that Milford is serious. We've had the money set aside for feasibility for years now. We're ready. We have the experience. Dr. Consigli was involved in a lot of the stuff, the educational profile and stuff like that's due as part of this period with the Woodland. So we have voices in town that have done this pretty recently. And to my understanding, they did a great job with Woodland. Woodland is still a showcased project on the MSBA website all this time later. So that's a testament to the work that they did for that building, and it's something we're going to be leveraging our people to do again. And it's necessary, but there's a lot of different ways to go.
But Woodland is frightening in that we thought the size of Woodland compared to what it was.
Yeah.
Well, this would be good for generations. You look at Woodland today, it's full.
It's full. It's full.
You know, so when I ask a question, in your mind, Milford High School, new or refurb?
Look, I'm going to go my own personal opinion. New's great, but is new financially and fiscally responsible? Right? We can't answer that question because we don't know if the current building can handle it. It may be able to handle a heavy remodel. They may go through and say, guys, you're not getting 50 years out of this build, 50 more years out of the core of this. It can't happen. I don't know. I don't know where you put kids to do a rebuild. If you're doing it on site and you have to demo, then there goes 1,400 kids and I don't know how many hundreds of staff. Where are they going? If you're doing it on property but not necessarily in that spot, can we do it? I don't know. That's what the feasibility is for. And that's why our focus right now is on the eligibility period. I mean, there's a lot of different things. There's a higher reimbursement potential for remodeling versus new. There's a lot of stuff you can get because you're recycling stuff. But we have to get to the point where we can pay people a lot smarter than me who study this stuff and who go through this for a living to be able to tell us what our options really are. But the bottom line is the new Milford High School, whatever its shape ends up being, that has to give our community current state-of-the-art learning environment. It has to give our community usable space. It has to be, a big, prideful mark on our town that's going to help generations and generations to come, regardless of how we get there. And that's just all part of the big discussion that's just only started and will continue for 8 to 10 years, realistically. It happens for years after construction is done, so we're just getting started.
And you bring up the word generational. I think we're going to have to, and it's blasphemy for somebody on the FinCom to be talking about adding. But, the whole concept of a field house.
Okay.
When you think about it, 1970s, the big argument was, what do we need another pool for? We'll never use it. And that was that generational opportunity as we built the new high school with an indoor pool. I don't think anybody today would question the validity of having the need of that pool.
Yeah.
I'm feeling the same way, and it kills me to encourage people to spend more money. But
yeah.
I go to the high school, and I see these kids running up and down the halls. And I was like, what's going on? Well, that's the cross-country team. It's cold outside. They can't run outside.
It is, yeah.
So they're running in the hallways. I hope that we can really take a good look at, as you said, one time, and that field house just feels like a generational opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's off the table, in my opinion. We have to have those discussions. We have to look at those things. But for me, one of the most important things we have the opportunity to do is include what's called Chapter 74 programming. Chapter 74 program is essentially vocational, state-sanctioned vocational programming. And I think this is important if we end up getting to the MCAS question. I have more on this as well. So this programming is critical because it gives our kids insight into what's out there, into the exciting, popular, on-demand fields post-high school and even post-college. It gives them real-world insight. It gives them an ability to find something that they might be passionate about. When I was in high school, you went to college for what you thought as a 16, 17, 18-year-old you wanted to do, and I stuck with it. But I can tell you, out of the 20 kids or so that were in my I went to a trade school that were in my direct shop, I'm one of 2 that are still doing it. So I think it's unfair to continue to push our kids in that way, and I think that being able to offer these opportunities to find different paths and explore different interests before they have to make a big commitment is really important. I would love a field house. I think that I would have infinite potential for all kinds of different things. But we have to remember the importance of a public education system is to set our kids up, especially in Milford, because we've done this with the Portrait of a Graduate, to be lifelong learners, to be people who are excited and energetic and willing and desire to continue to learn and grow. We have to build those students that way, and we have to guide them that way, and that starts with reading, writing, and math. Every single day, those 3 things are part of it.
And Matt, I couldn't agree with you more, because more than once I've asked educators, school administrators, what are you doing for people like my dad?
Yeah.
He had 4 years of primary school. Put him in an organic chemistry class, he's not doing very well. So he's not getting into BVT because he's not top 20% of the class.
We won't get into that topic.
No, but put a tool in that man's hand.
Yeah.
And he was an artist. And I've always felt bad that there's too many people, too many kids like my dad that couldn't get into BVT but weren't going to college, and we weren't doing enough of them.
Right.
So I love that. To me, it's a given that those programs are coming to the high school one way or another.
I hope so. That's all part of this eligibility period. We have to lay out a plan for that. And I think that we're lucky to have somebody like Principal Otlin at the he's been leading this discussion long before me. about the importance of these programs, and now we have an opportunity with a new high school to set up the right way. I mean, we have $600,000 in advanced scientific equipment that the town was very gracious to buy years ago. The spot it's in is embarrassing.
Yeah.
It needs to be put in the right place. And I can expand programs like that. We can offer, biomedical. We can offer tech security and data security. This is all very important stuff. And it's not just teaching kids that you can go from high school right into the workforce. Right? It's giving them insight. If you're somebody like me who really likes computers and you get to go test out data security and network security and all that stuff, and you find out you really like it, well, now you can narrow down the colleges you're looking at. Or you can choose to go apprentice and intern for a number of years at minimum wage or at a very low level entry salary and suck in all the experience and knowledge you can and prove yourself that way. But it gives you a direction based on experience rather than I don't even know.
Yeah, and I mean that investment we made over $500,000 in biotech equipment.
Yeah.
Was because the biggest employer in this side of the state is biotech.
Yes.
So I remember walking into the C Wing and looking, saying, hey, this is just like it was when I was here.
Right.
And yet, the town meeting couldn't do it all in 1 year. It took us 2 years. But we bought the equipment the kids needed.
We did.
To get them set.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the word MCAS.
Yeah, let's get to that. That's my favorite. That's a joke. MCAS.
Well, I mean, the fundamental question is, why is Milford's scores so low compared to towns around us?
Yeah, so that's where everybody always likes to go, and I'm assuming that the reason we go there all the time is because if you think about where you could send your child if you're unhappy with your district or your child you think needs from somewhere else, you're going to where you can drive, right? You're looking at the close locations. But we don't compare Milford to our surrounding towns for the same reason that we don't compare Bridgewater State University or Dean College football to the Patriots just because they're close. They're not on the same playing field. And DESE recognizes that. So we're a part of a group. They have what's called DART districts in your profile. And these are comparable towns, and they're based on grade span, total enrollment, and the special needs populations that you have. So our comparables in terms of our makeup and our challenges line up with towns, and I'm looking at some notes so I don't get these stats wrong. Barnstable, Malden, Marlborough, Somerville, West Springfield. Those are some of the towns that we compare to. It's not Medway, it's not Bellingham. I'll get to those in a minute. But when you look at how we compare to those towns, the ones that are most like Milford in the state, on grade 10, so I'm going to go with grade 10 just because that's the one that matters the most. When it comes to meeting and exceeding expectations, we're second out of 11 in English language arts in our comparables. We're tied for second out of 11 in math. The stat that I think the most interesting is something that they call a growth SGP. That's student growth percentile, and it's basically a measurement of a student's year-over-year improvement as they go through their educational career. When we look at the same group, we're first out of 11 in ELA, and we're second in math. So what that tells us is our teachers, as I think I said before, they're really, really strong and really, really good at meeting our students where they are and carrying them through their career and up the educational ladder and getting them to where they need to be. And that's what that stat shows us. But people like to talk about the towns around us, so I'll mention them. When we compare that growth percentage to surrounding towns, we're ahead of Medway and Bellingham in growth percentage. We're ahead of Holliston and Franklin in English and language arts. And we're within 3 to 4 points of Hopkinton. So what that tells you is that we're doing a very good job of taking our kids where they are and progressing them. That doesn't mean that we don't have a ways to go. Our scores could be a lot better. I don't think there's a town in the district, in the Commonwealth, that would say that we're good enough, we don't have to try any harder. We have more work to do, certainly, but it's not as gloom and doom as people like to make it sound, because our specific number isn't the same as Hopkinton or as Holliston.
The guy who put in perspective for me was Tommy Davern. Now, there was a principal who owned Middle School East.
Yes.
That was his world, his kids. Everything was personal because he took such pride in it.
Right.
So I decided to poke the bear once, and I walked in. I said, Tommy, why do your MCAS scores suck? He didn't even hesitate. He looks, says, because you're ignorant. I said, okay, enlighten me. He says, Al, you're looking at an average. We have a bimodal distribution.
Mhm.
He says, I'll put my top kids against any group in the state. He says, point blank, and they'll do just fine.
Yes, they will.
But when you average it in with a high special needs number,
Mhm.
you average it in, I mean, Matt, if I took you and said, I'm going to test you in Mandarin in 2 years, you're probably not going to do as well as kids who were born and raised speaking Mandarin.
I took Spanish. I would do equally as bad.
But, you know, it just had hit me when I looked at the curves.
Yeah.
Because at that point I said, good, now keep enlightening me. Show me the data. And sure enough, you had a bimodal distribution. You had a curve, a Gaussian curve of the top kids. And you had a Gaussian curve down below of kids who were just learning the language, just learning the country.
Right.
So to me, don't take this wrong, but you don't have an unbiased opinion. You're on the school committee.
Right.
To me, the people who do have an unbiased opinion are the colleges.
Sure.
So if our kids were getting into Okefenokee Community College as the standard, I would say you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
But I see the colleges they're getting into. I mean, when my daughter, my oldest, applied, she got into every college she applied to. And then the question comes up was, how well did Milford prepare her?
Right.
Well, she did have one bad semester. She got a 3.95 her junior year. She got that B plus that ruined her 4.0.
I got like a 3.6 my last year. I might have mailed it in knowing that it was already over. But otherwise, I was up there too.
But, you know, you sit there and say, at the end of the day, the colleges are, and the good colleges,
Yeah.
not just mediocre, the top colleges are accepting Milford kids,
Yeah.
and they're excelling there. So how would you answer a question if somebody asked, will my child get a good education in Milford?
They will. Look, number one, education is what you put into it, like everything else in life. What you put into it, where you are, and who you're surrounding yourself with, right? We have a lot of great staff, and I think that they do a really good job of helping our kids get to where they need to be. But if we think about college, this is another piece where I think Milford's doing a great job of trying to refocus the importance of education and what it really means, right? Our kids learn in 3 to 5 year chunks. The first 5 years of life, they're with you, they're at daycare, they're just learning the basics. Then they spend elementary school. For Milford, that's K through 5. And they build up on those skills. And then they're in middle school for 3 years, and they're building up more on those skills. And then they spend 4 years in high school. When I grew up, the goal was go to college. You go to college because if you don't, you're going to have a bad job and live under a bridge, or God knows what the threat
Right.
was. But you go to college because that's the only way, and that's how the employment sector looked at it. You didn't have a college degree, you didn't try hard enough, you weren't good enough. That's not the case anymore. The focus needs to shift, and we've been trying really hard to shift it already, to how to set our students up for success in the next 3 to 5 years after they graduate from Milford High School. And this is important because if you look at the stats about college right now, they're terrifying, in my opinion, as a parent and as somebody who's that far out of school. If you look back to 2016 to the current time, 62% of people who start an undergraduate program finish it in 6 years.
Really?
Yes. Only 66% ever finish it. So society is telling you, for many reasons, that the goal isn't always college. Now, being a lifelong learner, I would always encourage people to try to educate themselves further. College is a great option, but it's not always financially possible. And you may not know what you want to do. So driving kids directly to college just to get them there is not helpful. We need to get them there with the right schools, and that involves what a lot of our counselors and guidance folks are doing at high school now, at Milford High School now, which is trying to help them find one that financially fits, helping through a lot of the financial aid stuff, and setting them up to find the right school based on interest. And that's where those Chapter 74 programs will help too. It'll help kids find the right school or the right path for them, and that's what's the most important for I think for us in general. And that's how you guide your education.
Well, especially now, I mean, I was amazed when I graduated, Paul Revere and I spent $6,000 a year at
Yeah.
Holy Cross.
Yeah.
You know, he learned how to ride a horse then and do a speech. But $6,000 a year. I was amazed that my parents could afford it.
That's books now for
Yeah.
kids. It's
My
very
mom worked as a drill press operator in Draper's,
right.
making $11,000 a year.
Yeah.
It was bad enough then, but now these schools are $80,000 a year for a private school.
A year. And private school numbers, by the way, that 62% is an average. 78% finished private school in 6 years. So 6 years of $80,000 a year, and a fifth of them aren't doing it. It's terrifying. And it's just a focus of changing the way education works and the way we set our kids up, and it's meeting them where they are and getting them to climb that ladder and to learn and evolve and set them up for success when they leave Milford High School, because life is just going to keep coming at you in those segments. And our job is to get them ready for that first one, and then they'll take it from there.
We could go on, but I'm at a point where I have to say, Matt, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Al, I appreciate this show. I really look forward to this, and I could spend another hour. As you can tell, my passion's still there. My focus is still there. My dedication is still there. And there is a lot that I just am not finished with. Again, we're talking about literacy. We're talking about a new school. We're talking about reimagining how our high school careers go for our students. And there's a lot still open. There's still a lot to discuss. And I want to still be part of those discussions. It's a lot of conversations to have. So I think experience matters. I think that being involved in all of those discussions leading up to where we are and going past that to see these things through are very important. And I've gained that experience in the last 3 years. And I'm hopeful to get the support of the community to put another 3 years in to take Milford Public Schools further.
Thank you. As always, I've always promised I'll never ask you to vote for a specific candidate. But I'll beg you to get out and vote, especially school committee. Whether you have kids or not, they have a huge impact on your family, your finances. More importantly, if you have kids, they're the ones deciding what needs to be done to set your children up for success in the future. So please, Citizens Forum, Senior Center, this show, there's a lot of different ways that you can get to know the candidates. But spend some time and pick the candidates that you feel will best represent you and will be the future of Milford. As always, to our 6 loyal viewers, with the Zacchilli family, we may have more now watching tonight.
I hope so.
May God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today. And thank you for everything you do for our kids.
Thank you.